For example, the Prophet ﷺ said, don't get angry. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, advise me, O Messenger of Allah. Give me advice. What is the best thing for me to do? He said, don't get angry. Another companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, advise me, O Messenger of Allah. What's the best thing for me to do? What's the best thing that a man should do? He said, pray on time. Another man came and he asked him, what's the best thing that a man should do, O Messenger of Allah? He said, be kind to your parents. You find the Prophet ﷺ saying different things to different people. Why? Because Allah would give him information about that individual. Not that the Prophet ﷺ knew the unseen, because it's ignorance, that he was able to look into people's hearts and know what was going on in their hearts, and then he would tell them what was good for them. No, Allah would reveal to him through angel Jibreel that such and such a person doesn't treat his parents well, such and such a person prays late, such and such a person gets angry all the time. So Prophet ﷺ would give them the appropriate instruction which was appropriate for them. So he said, La taghdab, don't get angry. He said, if you find yourself angry when you're standing, sit down. And if you're still angry, lie down. But at the same time, when Usama ibn Zayd came and told him that he had killed a man during a battle in which the man had said, La ilaha illallah, and he went ahead and killed him. And he told the Prophet ﷺ, because he had some doubt, the Prophet ﷺ got angry. When Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam had slapped his slave girl in her face, and he came and told the Prophet ﷺ what he did, the Prophet ﷺ got angry. So there are times when the Prophet ﷺ got angry. So we know that when he said, don't get angry, this was not an absolute prohibition, but a recommendation. And that's why he told that man, don't get angry, but he told another man, pray on time. Right? So there's a recommendation there in avoiding getting angry, right? Controlling oneself. And he said that the strong individual, the truly strong individual, is not the champion wrestler. He is the one able to control himself or herself in a time of anger. That's the real strength. So he recommended this control of anger. And this is important because, coming from a Western perspective, we had been fed this idea of getting it off your chest. It's better if you're upset with somebody, rather than keeping this thing inside of you and it's just seething inside of you, you just let them have it and you feel better. And basically they promoted this is good. It's better for you. Rather than holding it inside yourself, you like explode at some point. Better to just let it all hang out, right? But later on, I remember seeing some reports I was reading about 2 years ago. I was reading an article when they explained that no, it isn't better. Actually, the studies have shown that those people who let it out, they burst vessels in their brain and all kinds of things happen to them, that it is not good for you to let it out. It's better for you to control it and overcome it. That's the better thing. And that's what Islam says. That's what Islam taught. Don't let it out. Control it. But some occasions it is permissible to get angry. When? As the Prophet ﷺ showed us. When it has to do with the deen. Not when your wife spills tea all over your brand new thobe. This is the time your blood vessels are bursting. No. This is not time. It's just, it's something from the dunya. MashaAllah. She didn't do it deliberately. Out of spite or something like that. It's accident. Unfortunately, I know a number of people who, from the West who married people from the East. Arabs and others, they would complain, every little thing we do, this guy is hitting us and all that. Because they would just, any little mistake is just like, and of course people do it also, even in the West. This thing of beating wives and, wife beating is a tradition. Right? But in Islam, of course, we are instructed to control ourselves, judge that thing properly, that incident, put it in its proper perspective, be responsible for our actions, know everything is recorded and we will be held accountable, and deal with the situation. One thing to point out here before going on to the haram is that makruh also trains us, avoiding the makruh also trains us in self-control, to avoid the things which are haram. Just as the mustahab trains us in doing good things, which makes doing the compulsory easier, avoiding the makruh helps us to deal with the haram. And it acts as a barrier between us and haram, just as mustahab acts as a barrier between us and the fard. That is, harming our fard, doing the haram. Now, as a sign to us regarding the makruh, we have an incident from the Prophet ﷺ's life in which he said, on one occasion when he saw an individual lying on the ground by the name of Ya'ish ibn Tikhafa. He saw him lying on the ground on his stomach, so he came and he nudged him with his foot. When he woke up and he looked at the Prophet ﷺ, he told him, this is the method of lying which God hates. God hates that you lie on your stomach, sleeping on your stomach. Okay? Sleeping on the stomach was disliked. Now, of course, people commonly, they like to sleep on their stomach. And I know this is one of the etiquettes of sleeping in Islam. And I remember on one occasion when I was in Panama, teaching a course there and in etiquettes, Islamic etiquettes, and I spoke on this. Afterwards, people asked me, why? Why is it disliked to sleep on your stomach? And I really didn't have an answer. I mean, I'd been told some things when I was on Jamaat Tabligh, because I did ask the question myself, but the answer they gave me wasn't satisfactory. They said, if you're on Jama'ah, you're by yourself, you sleep on your stomach, the likelihood of you getting a wet dream is greater. That's why. But hey, what about women? It's not the same situation. And what about if your wife was there with you? So I wasn't satisfied with that explanation. Anyway, I just told them, hey, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, God hates it, He dislikes it, better you don't do it. From there I was flying to Guyana to do a course in Guyana also. Whilst I was on the airplane, I was reading the Time magazine. And this Time magazine issue was dedicated to the latest developments in spinal surgery. They were showing the latest medical hardware and how it dealt with the problems of slip discs and crushed discs and the different operations they were doing, and they showed pictures of people's back cut open and And at the end of it all, they had a list of doctors' recommendations to avoid spinal problems. Number one on the list was, don't sleep on your stomach. That was number one. I said, MashaAllah, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. And they went on to explain. They gave a whole explanation about it. Yes, the spine, heavy, bony structure, heaviest one in your whole body. When you sleep on your stomach, everything in front of it is soft tissue, soft organs. Your intestines, your stomach, your lungs, all of this is soft. So what happens is that the spine sags downwards. And this is what contributes to the exaggerated, what they call lumbar curvature of the spine. You old people, they're walking around, their backs are like this. This is from this. Yeah, they pointed it out. Furthermore, I said, mashallah, that was something. You know. Then that was like 1981 when I came across that. And alhamdulillah, from then on I used to mention it in lectures and so on. So people could see, you know, this is benefit there, something that you can't imagine. 1,400 years ago, Muslims, when the Prophet ﷺ said, don't do it because it's hated by Allah, they stopped doing it. Though they used to like to sleep on the stomach just as we do. And over these 1,400 years, they benefited. All the people who didn't do it were harmed in one way or another. So I said, mashallah. And that's how we should approach the things which Allah has prohibited and disliked. That it's better not to do it. Stay away from it because there's harm in it. Even if we can't see where the harm is. Anyway, in 1989, I read an article which appeared in the British newspapers that scientists, medical scientists, studying a particular illness which seemed to be affecting small children, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old kids, put to sleep in their cribs, they die in their sleep. They call it crib death or sudden death syndrome, SDS. Different names they give it to it. But they didn't know why. What was causing this thing? So medical researchers did some statistical studies. They sent out researchers to people whose children had died, and they gathered up information about what the circumstances of the home was, what type of beds they put them in, what was the temperature of the rooms, all kinds of information. Anything they could think of that was related to the circumstance in which the child went to sleep that might possibly have a common factor, which would then be the danger factor. When they fed this stuff into computers, correlated the results, up popped what? Children being put to sleep on their stomachs. So they made a major announcement across England, front page news. Doctors warn parents, do not put your children to sleep on their stomachs. And the warning came over here too, into the United States. I mean, it was British researchers, so there it was, every newspaper across Britain carried it. That was 1989. In America, some newspapers carried it. It was right across the country. Anyway, the point is that 7 years later, in 1996, the researchers, after making this a standard part of, you could say, the information given to people who just had children, this kind of stuff, hospital information, advising parents, don't put your children to sleep on the stomach, and this countrywide campaign to make this known, they found that after 7 years, the rate of cot death had dropped by some 68 or something like this %. It had dropped drastically. So, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, here is further evidence that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ 1,400 years ago, when nobody had any idea of what harm there was, obviously this was, how did the Prophet ﷺ know that God hated this? Do you think he just looked at the person and said, I think God hates this? Let me tell him God hates this. No. Obviously, angel Gabriel came and told him, when he saw the man lying there, he told him that Allah hates lying on the stomach. So he passed on that revelation that came to him. Right? And that's how we have to treat the instructions from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There is benefit in following them. The last category, that of the haram, the forbidden things. This area, when we say something is haram, forbidden, it means that if you do it, there is a sin against you. If you don't do it, you earn a reward. It is the exact opposite of wajib. Wajib, if you do it, you get a reward. If you don't do it, you earn a sin. Right? Do it, you get a reward. Haram, do it, you get a sin. Wajib, don't do it, you get a sin. Haram, don't do it, you get a reward. So it's the exact opposite. Anyway, how do we know when something is wajib, is haram? We know, just as in the command for the wajib, you have a command which indicates prohibition. The Prophet ﷺ said, don't do. A negative imperative. Don't do. That the same way when the authority says to the subject, don't do, this means absolutely don't do. Same principle we use to identify the wajib and the fard. When an instruction is given from the higher authority to the lower must follow. In the case of wajib, follow means do. In the case of haram, follow means don't do. So as long as Allah or His Messenger has prohibited a particular act or thing, then we assume that this prohibition is an absolute prohibition. If you do it, you're committing a sin. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, don't eat with your left hand, لا تأكل بالشمال فإن الشيطان يأكل بالشمال, because Satan eats with the left. When he said don't eat with the left, that means don't eat with the left. It's haram to eat with your left hand. That's what it means. So much so that when a man before him ate with his left, and the Prophet ﷺ said, don't eat with your left, eat with your right. The man said, I can't. Not really he couldn't, he didn't want to. So the Prophet ﷺ said, perhaps you will not be able to. And his right hand shriveled up. Right? It was a miracle from Allah that the curse came on him immediately. He suffered from it. So it is something. Eating with the left is, or drinking with the left is prohibited. It's a common practice amongst Muslims when you sit down and eat, finish eating, right? You're eating with your hands. So your hands got grease or whatever. You're eating biryani and got some grease all over your hands. So you now have to drink. So what do? You pick up the glass in your left hand, you put your right hand underneath, and then you drink. It's a common practice, right? This is drinking with the left hand. The fact that you stick your hand down the bottom here doesn't change it now to drinking with your right hand. Because if you remove this hand, where's the glass? Still in your left hand. But now if you remove your left hand, where's the glass? Falling in your lap, right? So it's clear you are drinking with the left. Right? Very important point, because it's become a common practice, standard practice, but it's cultural and it's wrong Islamically. Put your hand on the glass and drink. So what? It gets greasy, it's going to be washed anyway. You know? Also, whenever, as we said from this, whenever Allah prohibits something, it means absolute prohibition unless stated otherwise. We should avoid such a thing absolutely. If Allah says in the Quran, or the Prophet ﷺ also says, that we should avoid a thing completely, that is evidence that it is haram. Just because he didn't say it's haram, but he said, don't come near it. Hey, that is even stronger than just saying it's haram. Right? As in the case of alcohol, gambling, and fortune telling, where Allah in Surah Al-Ma'idah said, indeed gambling, alcohol, gambling, fortune telling are filth from the work of Satan, so avoid them totally in order to be successful. I should mention here as a point that the term filth, rijs, another term for it in Arabic is najas or najasa. Some scholars took from this that alcohol is najasa, that if najasa gets on you, your wudu is broken, you cannot pray with najasa on you. So they ruled that the use of cologne with alcohol in it was prohibited because it is najasa. However, this alcohol, mention of alcohol here, is mentioned along with gambling and fortune telling. Is gambling impurity? Physical? Meaning when you play with your poker cards, your wudu is broken? No, it's not. Nobody says this. Or you use a fortune telling device, your wudu is broken? No. So what was understood from this, more correctly, is that the filth that is mentioned here is spiritual filth. That it defiles one's iman. This is where the danger lies. So the use of alcohol in this regard it's permissible in colognes, etc. And again, what we have to keep in mind is that cologne and the alcohol in cologne, is it drinking alcohol? People who drink cologne, what happens to them? They go blind, you know. So simply because it is chemically referred to as alcohol, we clarified before that what is intended here when we talk about the prohibition of alcohol is the drinking alcohol, the one from which you become intoxicated. Otherwise, as we mentioned earlier, you can't even use antifreeze, because antifreeze is also alcohol. We can know that something is haram also, haram absolutely, if we find in the instruction not to do it a punishment in the Sharia. If you do such and such a thing, you will be punished. Stealing, your hand is cut off. So it is haram. There are punishments in the Sharia for it. Anything where a punishment has been prescribed. But that punishment may be in this life or the next life. If hellfire is associated with this thing, then it means that it is also haram. If the Prophet ﷺ said that you do this thing, you will be in the hellfire, then that thing is haram. If he said you will not enter paradise if you do it, then that thing is haram. As he said, the gossiper will not enter paradise. La yadkhulul jannah namam. A person who is always spreading gossip, always talking about other people all the time. Every conversation, that's all they can talk about is people. Such a person, the Prophet ﷺ said, will not enter paradise. And there is a narration from Haritha ibn Wahab in which the Prophet ﷺ said, shall I inform you of the people of hell? And the companion said, yes. And the Prophet ﷺ said, every haughty, fat and proud person. Every haughty, fat and proud person. So people who get fat from overeating, this is something haram in Islam. And if you're fat because you've got a glandular problem, that's another thing. And in one of the signs you can find in Sahih Bukhari, Prophet ﷺ said, among the signs of the last day is that there would appear among my ummah fat people. يَظْهَرْ فِيهِ مُسِّمًا. That this was not a characteristic, a physical characteristic of the true believers. They control their eating habits. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the worst thing that a human being can fill is his or her stomach. The worst thing. We should eat without filling ourselves. Eat without feeling complete satisfaction, meaning you can't eat anymore. This is one of the areas which unfortunately many of us, I'm not excluding myself, fall short. So we need to reflect on this one. Anyway, where there is a curse of Allah or the curse of the Prophet Muhammad, this is also indicative of a thing being haram. As in the hadith of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet said, Allah's messenger cursed men who dressed like women and women who dressed like men. And Aisha, on one occasion, saw a woman wearing men's sandals, and she said, Allah's messenger cursed mannish women. So this thing of distinguishing between males and females in Islam is a very strong thing. What is known to be the symbols of masculinity, etc., these things Islam insists upon. And this is why you can find the command to grow your beards, because this is among the characteristics of the men. Being clean-faced is among the characteristics of the women. So he instructed, grow your beards. This is part of this is an aspect. Of course, it's also distinguishing ourselves from the Jews and pagans, because he said grow the beard and trim the mustaches to distinguish ourselves from them. I should mention also here the instruction when Prophet ﷺ said, what is below the ankle of male garments is in the hellfire. This is telling us that wearing our garments below the ankle is haram. It's associated with the hellfire. Some people say, well, it's just the part of your pants which is below the the garment is in the hellfire. Just that part below. Hey, you are in the hellfire with it. Don't think it's just the cuff of your pants is going in the hellfire. It's you and the cuff will end up in the hellfire. So let us not consider this thing to be small. It's a minor. Prophet ﷺ said, Iyakum wa muhaqqarati dhunub. Beware of the scorned sins, scorned minor sins. These sins we say, it's the small sin. Beware of the scorned sins, because they are like a people who come into a valley and they need to cook. And they go to different parts of the valley. Everybody brings a stick, small stick, small stick. They put it together and they have a bonfire. Now, the purpose of prohibition of things we spoke about earlier is that they protect us from things which are extremely harmful, which are harmful to the society as a whole. Whether we're able to understand where the harm lies or not, alcohol, the harm is obvious. The pig, the harm is not so obvious. The harm is not so obvious in the pig. But we believe there is major harm. Not just a bit of harm, but major harm in the pig. Otherwise, Allah is not going to prohibit it. He is not desirous of creating difficulties in life to keep us away from things which are beneficial. No. He prohibits the things which are harmful, where the harm is widespread. So when he prohibited the pig, it's because there's real harm in it. Not just the trichinosis that we have discovered, or the fact that the pig has a lot of fat and the body cannot break down pig fat, though it can break down cow fat and sheep fat and the others, but the pig fat, we don't have the enzymes to break it down to its lowest components, so it is redeposited in our system, in our blood vessels and things like this, and doctors recommend to stay from it if you have, problems with clogging of the arteries, all these type of things. We can see all that, but people can always say to you, what if we raise a hygienic pig? No trichinosis. And a lean pig, we don't feed him any, stuff that's going to make him fat. He's just bones and muscle. Are you going to eat him now? No. Still don't eat him. Yeah. So those things we have found, let us not assume that is it. No. There is harm. Some of the scholars of the past pointed out that perhaps the harm had to do with the nature of the pig. When we look at the animals that are prohibited to us to eat, from eating, we see that in general there are animals which are carnivores. The carnivores, the lion, the tiger, birds of prey that kill with the claw, the hawk, the eagle, the osprey, they are prohibited to us. Alligators, etc. The sea is different. Animals which are sea animals, because the shark is a predator also, but we can eat it. Big fish eat small fish, but we can eat them. So the ruling concerning the sea is different from the ruling for the land animals, right? These are the land animals, the birds. These are the forbidden animals. Perhaps this has to do with the nature of these animals. That their nature is a violent nature. When you observe the cow and the sheep and the goats, when they eat their vegetable matter, very chewing the cud, this is just calm type animals. But then if you've ever seen National Geographic where they're showing the tigers and the lions hunting the animals and how they just get out there, they tear this thing apart, the claws and teeth and blood, and you say, wow, very vicious. Not that they're deliberately thinking, hey, I'm going to be vicious today. Hey, that's just how they are. That's their nature, to eat in that way. And that's why you read about cases every year, every so often. These movie actors, they like to get these exotic pets. They buy a Black Panther or whatever, and you see them walking down the street with their panther or whatever. And then you read in the newspaper, he got clawed by his panther. He's playing with his panther. One day he just tears off half his arm. Why? He had raised this panther it was a little kitten. And all of a sudden the thing is, because that is its nature. No matter how much you try to domesticate, it has this nature. Similarly, for the lion tamers, this is a very high-paid profession. Because the high point of the lion tamer show is when he gets the lion up there and he opens up his jaw and he puts his head and everybody says, whoa, look at that boy. No way you get me doing one of those, right? And they do it. But every year a lion decides to close his mouth and a lion tamer loses his head. That's why they get good pay. They get danger pay here, So this is the nature. And anybody who has observed the pig, go to a pig farm and observe the pig. Its nature is filthy. It just loves filth. You put him in a clean area, he will wallow in his own feces, and yes, that is the nature of the pig. However you try to keep him, he loves filth. So, as they say, you are what you eat. There's a famous German nutritionist, he started that statement, you are what you eat. That's the bottom line. You're eating the pig, you're building yourself up with the pig, his enzymes, his protein, his genes, your body's breaking it down and remaking itself. It is affecting you. It is affecting you. Allah knows. This could very well be the essence of it. Now some people say, hey, the pig, why did Allah make the pig then? And of course, Muslims, people who are raised as Muslims, who have lived lives as practicing Muslims, who have never eaten the pig, in their mind, the pig must be nasty tasting. Well, to be honest, I was raised a non-Muslim, and my parents used to cook up pork, and it tasted good. It didn't taste bad, it tasted nice, and that's why it's popular. So it's not about it being nasty tasting. No, not at all. So the people ask, well then why did Allah forbid it? You know, if we discount this other element, right, of you being what you eat and all the other things, right? We say, hey, observe the pig. The pig is a garbage disposal unit, a living one. You got garbage, filth, whatever, the pigs go, they clean it up for you. So, that's his job, that's his role. And you don't have to eat everything Allah made. Do we eat flies? You know, people could argue, why don't we eat the fly? We don't have to eat the fly. He has a job, he does his job, very important. Some kids ask, why did Allah make the fly? It's so nasty. The fly has an important role. If we didn't have flies that lay their eggs in animal matter, and then the maggots come out and chew it up and break it down, we would be up to our necks in, carcasses and things like that, because it won't break down without them. They play a major role in keeping our societies clean. They have a role. We don't go eating them. We don't have to eat them. We see what their job is, and common sense tells us we don't have to eat it. We don't eat it. Technically speaking, if you wanted to eat a fly, nobody could say it's haram. You realize that, right? I'll just clarify that in case you wanted to, people who eat flies, right? I'm saying technically speaking, though I wouldn't want to eat it and I wouldn't recommend it, if you did choose to eat flies, it's halal. But we don't eat it. Okay? The last part of the book, and of course you can read it in more detail to understand the issue of why there are differences in the schools of Islamic law. Because this is something that we're presented with. We have the Maliki school, the Shafi'i school, the Hanafi school, the Hanbali school. And they have different rulings. Part of the reasons has to do with the lack of hadith narrations. Because as I mentioned to you before, when we did the section on hadith, that the major compilations of hadith took place after the leading scholars of Islamic law. Some of the scholars were also themselves hadith collectors, but the major work of Bukhari, Muslim and the others, they came after the Imams. In fact, Imam Bukhari was a student of Ahmed ibn Hanbal, the last of the four Imams. So he was a student. So his major work was not available to the scholars before him. So the lack of hadith narrations also contributed, because scholars then made rulings based on what information they had. So if they didn't have information from hadith, they would use a principle from Quran to try to deal with particular rulings. Furthermore, there are differences which occurred as a result of wordings, that certain words sometimes carried more than one meaning. Like in the case of quru in the Quran, where Allah said the divorced women should wait 3 quru, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ quru. That quru meant in Arabic both the period of the menses as well as the period of purity between menses. So it could be one or the other. And different scholars made different rulings on the basis of it. Imam Malik, Shafi and Ahmed, they ruled that quru meant the period of purity between menses. Whereas Abu Hanifa ruled that the qur meant the actual menses themselves. Anyway, the resolution of that conflict can be found in hadith. There's a hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha in which she said, Habiba had irregular menses and she asked the Prophet about it. He told her to stop praying during the days of her qur. So what does qur mean then? The menses. So knowledge of that hadith ends the argument. In this case, Abu Hanifa was right. The other three imams were wrong. You can also find, in the case of touching women mentioned in the Quran, أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَا فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. In reference to those who touched women and couldn't find water, Allah said, make tayammum. From that, Imam Shafi'i ruled that touching women meant literally, you touched a woman, your wudu is broken. That's why you'll see women commonly coming from Indonesia when they're making Hajj. Those of you they wear gloves, these white gloves, to protect them from touching a woman so it won't break wudu. And a common cultural practice amongst Egyptians, right, who shake hands with women, it's become a norm. What they do is, in order to not break wudu, they'll put their hand in their pocket of their thobe and they'll shake hands this way, right? That way they don't break their wudu. Of course, shaking hands with women is forbidden in Islam. It's haram. Anyway, the point is that Imam Abu Hanifa, he ruled that touching women don't break wudu. And when we go to the hadith, we find hadiths from the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, from Aisha, for example, that whilst Prophet ﷺ was praying in her house, she was sitting with her feet extended in front of him. He used to touch her foot to move it when he came to make sujood. So he was touching her foot and praying. Furthermore, other wives narrated that he kissed them and went and led the people in salah immediately. So if touching meant you don't have wudu, it meant the Prophet ﷺ was leading people without wudu. So it's clarified there that what was meant by the touching here was the figurative meaning, sexual relations. Then the person must make tayammum if they don't have water, otherwise they make ghusl. So the reasons for differences, as I said, may go back to a variety of different principles. I just mentioned two of the main ones, which is good for you to know. And beyond those differences, we need to also look at the general concept of difference amongst the ummah, which some people had mistakenly promoted as being something favorable. That differences amongst the ummah is something good. And they quote a hadith, اختلاف ummati rahma. اختلاف ummati rahma. However, these narrations, اختلاف ummati rahma, and narrations similar to it, are not authentic. They're either fabricated or they're just extremely weak. They're not authentic. And they go against clear prohibitions of differences in the Quran, where Allah says, وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. Do not dispute among yourselves and cause your own failure and loss of power. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Don't be like the idolaters. مِنَ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيَعًا كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. Like those who split up their religion into sects, each group happy with what they had. This is something despised. And Allah said, if your Lord willed, He would have made humankind one people, but they will not cease to dispute except those on whom Allah has bestowed His mercy. So here, those who are not involved in differences, they are the ones whose Allah's mercy is upon. So therefore, differences, splitting up into different groups, is not something good. It is something evil. And of course Allah said, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, hold on firmly to the rope of Allah, all of you. So the issue of unity is something important and is an obligation on Muslims wherever it is possible. But unity doesn't mean unity at any price. Meaning we'll make unity with the Ansar. Because some people saying unity, the Ansar, they say they're Muslims, so we should unite with. No. Unity means unity upon the truth. Unity can only be achieved if people are unifying upon the Quran and the Sunnah as it was understood by the Salaf of the Ummah. The Salafiyya approach to Islam, which is a methodology in which we understand Quran and Sunnah according to the understanding of the Sahaba. That is the only basis for real unity. Otherwise, we end up in what appears to be unity, but there is disunity. Like in Afghanistan, for example, when the various groups united to overthrow and drive out the Russians and topple the communist rule. And what happened after that? They were united. They had a council and everything, and they fought together and defeated them. But then what happened after that? They went right at each other's throats. They were out there killing each other in numbers. It was just a mayhem all over Afghanistan. Each one grabbed this area. It's like warlords controlling this area and that area. This is why the Taliban, in spite of whatever is, errors that they have in some of their concepts or whatever, they have done a major service to the Afghans, because they have brought security to some 95% of Afghanistan. People can travel, people can go in safety. People on the Pakistani side of the borders, scared. People are robbed. You're driving on the road, people stop your car and take your money. In a lack of security, you drive into Afghanistan, boom. Because they cut off your hand if they catch you stealing. They kill you if you rape. So security, in spite of whatever people may not like about the Taliban, by applying the Sharia, they brought security to the land. Right? But as I said, those groups, because of the fact that their unity was not based on the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the Salaf of the Ummah, once the reason for their unity went, then disunity reigned. And that will happen every time people unite on that basis. This is why the correct basis on which to unify is on the methodology of what we refer to as Salafi. The Salafi methodology. I know Salafi to some degree today has come to be like a bad word. The Salafis are these extremist individuals who, are creating what appears to be havoc amongst the Ummah today. Labeling people and chopping people off the list of, reliable this, don't listen to their tapes and this and that, and, off the minhaj.com. This is what Salafiyya unfortunately has been portrayed as. But please, let us not mistake the practice of some groups which have gone to extreme in certain areas to be Salafiyya. No, Salafiyya is a methodology. It's not a group. It's not an organization. You can be in any organization which is in accordance with Quran and Sunnah, etc., and hold that methodology. Right? But this is the point. This is the correct way. This is the way, as the Prophet ﷺ said, 73 sects. The Ummah would divide up into 73, 72 in hell and 1 paradise. When they asked him, what is that one? He said, the one that I am on and you are on. Companions of the Prophet. That is the one way. So just as we reject the idea that all religions lead to God. You have some people out there, Muslims, who basically in this interfaith kind of dialogue thing, it's you scratch my back, I scratch your back, I pat you pat, so we're all right, everybody's okay, as long as you're a sincere Buddhist, you're a sincere Hindu, you're a sincere Christian, we're all headed for God, to God. No, this is a false ideology. They call it the perennialist ideology, promoted by people like Guy Eaton. I don't know if you've seen his books. Guy Eaton from England, and what's that other person who did the Sirah of the Prophet? Martin Lings. He's amongst that group. There's a group of them who promote this idea. They say all the religions are like spokes on a wheel. Allah is the hub, all the religions going to the same direction. No, we reject that. No, there's only one true religion, and that is Islam. All the others are headed to hell. There's only one way. So similarly, as there's only one true religion, because there's only one humanity, there's only one human race. Though people have propagated the ideas of different races, there's only one race, the human race. There's one human race, there's one God, there's one religion, and there's only one way to follow that religion. See, some people say, no, there's many ways, as long as you're Quran and Sunnah, No, there's only one way. This is the Tawheed, right down the line, from one God, one humanity, one religion, because that's what makes sense. Why would Allah have one humanity with the same needs and then He revealed to them a mass of different religions? No, that's illogical. That's confusion. Allah doesn't wish for His people confusion. So there's one religion. And there's only one way to follow that religion. Because otherwise, again, you're ending up in confusion. The Qadianis say we follow Quran and Sunnah. They say we follow Quran and Sunnah. But according to whose interpretation? Their own. So they're off. They're not Muslims at all. So we are on one path. Disagreement is a curse. Differences which relate back to genuine differences in the Prophet ﷺ's practice, these should be tolerated. We should not think that though there's only one way to follow the religion, there's only one way to do everything in the religion. Because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he made takbir, sometimes he did it Allahu Akbar, and sometimes he did it Allahu Akbar. So, if you do this one, or you do this one, it's okay. He didn't do this one, Allahu Akbar. Okay, watch out for this. People in laziness, they no longer put their palms towards Qibla. They just sort of flip the hand over like this. This is not acceptable. Nor did he say, this is for men, and people go farther to touch their ears. Because there's nothing in the Sunnah saying about touching your ears. Right? He said he raised his hands to the level of his ears. Right? And then this is for women. Why? Because, women, chest, cover the chest. Hey, Prophet ﷺ never said that. He never taught that. This is people making up their own, thing, right? So, where the Prophet ﷺ genuinely did different things in different ways, then these we have to recognize, accept, and tolerate. So, for example, if we make the salah, after this, we eat and make salah. And then at the end of the salah, I say, Salaamu Alaikum. I know you're all waiting. Wa rahmatullah. What about the other salam alaikum? Guess what? Prophet ﷺ on some occasions used to close the salah saying salam alaikum. That's it. We should know this. These are differences. We should be able to be aware of it and to tolerate it. Because if you go to North Africa, you go to Morocco, you go to Algeria, that's what you're going to find. The imams, when they finish the prayer, they just say salam alaikum. Finished. Because that was from the sunnah also. So where there are genuine differences based in the sunnah, we should recognize them, we should know them and tolerate them. We don't need to make everybody do it the way we have chosen to do it, as long as those differences are legitimate. Furthermore, there are two other points I think we should be aware of. And these important points, we should be aware of these two terms which you may hear thrown around, which really mean the bad guys. Besides Salafiyah, there's some earlier terms they would throw around, and that is Wahhabis and Ahli Hadith. Right? These are the two terms. Basically, in modern times, these two terms mean heretics, apostates. You're a Wahhabi, you know. And what happens is that as soon as people, generally speaking, people who are from Muslim countries, etc., when they come, they wake up to the Quran and the Sunnah, they learn about it. Now it's time to start practicing Quran and Sunnah. And they go back to their families and they try to tell them, listen, Rasulullah ﷺ used to do this. They say, you're Wahhabi. You've been poisoned. You've become a Wahhabi. Or you're Ahli Hadith. These terms are used to mean you have deviated. When in fact, you're on the truth. You're following the truth. But because of the fact that deviation has become so widespread in the ummah today, what is in fact the truth appears deviant. It appears deviant. And this is why from fiqh of da'wah, we have to be careful as we introduce and educate people to the sunnah, that we don't mix up our priorities. We have a brother or a sister who prays to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They pray to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But at the same time, for example, they wear their pants below their ankle. We don't go and focus on correcting them wearing the pants above the ankle and leave praying to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now both things are wrong, but praying to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a major wrong, because this is shirk. This can put them in hell forever. Therefore we have to prioritize our problems that we're trying to resolve and to change, etc. And this reminds me of something which I came across when I was in Medina, where I was with a group of brothers and that who, were very much on the Sunnah, trying to study and to learn more about the Sunnah. Actually, this group were among the students of Sheikh Nasruddin Albani. Whenever he used to come to Medina, we used to sit with him and he was teaching so and so. And when he was away, they continued. And one of the leaders of that group was Sheikh Muqbil. He was the main one in the absence of Sheikh Nasruddin. Anyway, the point is that we learned, as Sheikh Nasr taught us, that praying in your shoes is sunnah. Praying in your shoes is from the sunnah. Now the mass of the ummah, they don't know this.